Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityo Ma Amritam Gamaya Abhirma Eti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Te Namam Ahinityam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the ever-changing to the unchanging. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through, and guide us evermore with thy loving presence. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Good morning. This morning we commemorate the birth of Swami Brahmananda, the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna and the first president and spiritual leader of the monastic and lay organization that bears Ramakrishna's name. The topic is Swami Brahmananda as a spiritual teacher, Part 2. I've never done a Part 2, so we'll see. Last year I happened to speak on the Sunday closest to his birth anniversary, and that was the topic, and there's actually a lot of material, so we'll have another go at it. His actual birthday is tomorrow in the lunar calendar. We'll start with a brief sketch of Swami Brahmananda's life. Then we'll look at some of his characteristics as a spiritual teacher. And finally, we'll focus on first-hand accounts of his interaction with friends, monastic disciples, and devotees during the mature period of his life, when he was essentially a spiritual teacher. How he prodded, counseled, reprimanded, and otherwise inspired people to set their feet on the path and realize God. And I might mention here that I said, why would you talk about him as a spiritual teacher with reference to friends? It's because he was always teaching. He was never off. It wasn't a job. That's who he was. That's why he was called to earth. As a teacher, as an inspirer, as a builder of lives, as an instrumental part in this whole effort to realign the human species towards a more spiritual path. He was born Rakal Chandra Ghosh on January 21st, 1863, 9 days after Swami Vivekananda, in a village about 36 miles from Calcutta, and he lived about 60 years, dying in 1922. His father was Ananda Mohan Ghosh. He was a landlord. That means he was a very rich, prominent man. His mother was a pious woman and a devotee of Lord Krishna. Perhaps that was why she named him Rakal. This was the boyhood companion of Sri Krishna. Unfortunately, she died when Rakal was only 5, and soon after, Ananda Mohan married again. Fortunately, she wasn't a wicked stepmother. She was a good mother to him. He grew up a very healthy and fine-looking boy. There was something in his very appearance which endeared him to one and all. His education began in the village school, which was started by his father, primarily for the education of his son. During those days, corporal punishment was common in the village schools, and the usual method was taking some kind of rod and rapping the knuckles of the student, usually until they cried, and would mend their ways. And this particular schoolmaster had that method, but he noticed that although Rakal was an exemplary young man and didn't need that kind of treatment, whenever one of his boyhood friends got that kind of reprimand, Rakal would very quietly sit there with tears coming down his eyes. His sympathy for his schoolmates was such that that's what happened. And the schoolmaster, realizing that this was causing this reaction, actually stopped the corporal punishment because of Rakal. As a student, he was remarkable for his intelligence, but he had varied interests. Physically, he was much stronger than the average boy of his age. His companions found it hard to cope with him in wrestling or at play. He would take part in village games and show unsurpassed skill, but playing games did not absorb his whole attention. Nearby was a temple dedicated to Mother Kali, and often Rakal would be found in the area of the temple. Sometimes he would play at mother worship, along with his companions. He himself would fashion beautiful clay images of the Divine Mother and remained absorbed in the worship of that image. He was a great devotee of gods and goddesses as a boy. During the time of Durga Puja, he would be found seated still and calm, witnessing the ceremony. At the hour of dusk, when the evening vespers, the evening service was being performed, Rakal would be seen standing before the deity with great devotion. He had an instinctive love for devotional music. When the wandering monks sang songs in praise of Krishna, the flute player of Vrindavan, or when anyone sang songs about the Divine Mother, he would become lost to himself. Sometimes he would go to the field close to the village, and he and his companions would sing devotional songs in chorus. In the course of singing, Rakal would occasionally become lost to all outward consciousness, his mind soaring in a higher region. You'll recall this was also the habit of Sri Ramakrishna as a boy, except he'd go right directly into samadhi when he was a little boy. But Rakal would go into some sort of ecstasy spontaneously. When he was 12, he was sent to live with his stepmother's family in Calcutta in order to attend a proper school and learn English. There he came to know Swami Vivekananda, who lived in the neighborhood and was the leader of the boys there. They became fast friends. They worked out in the same gym, and they joined the Brahmo Samaj, or rather, Swami Brahmananda followed Narendra's lead and joined the Brahmo Samaj. His father had great hope for him. He's such an intelligent, capable, strong young man. There was a lot of responsibility to be trained for to take care of his vast lands. And this natural tendency to religion manifested itself more prominently when he was in Calcutta. Seeing it, the worried father arranged his marriage when he was 18. But instead of drawing the young man into worldly life, this marriage actually opened the way to his eventual renunciation of the world. As it happened, his wife was the sister of one of Sri Ramakrishna's earliest disciples, Mano Mohan Mitra. And it was Mano Mohan who took his brother-in-law, Rakal, in the summer of 1881 to the Kali temple where Sri Ramakrishna lived. Now, While all this was going on, Sri Ramakrishna had been waiting a long time for his disciples. When he was at a certain period of his life, he would go to the roof of one of the buildings at the Dakshineswar Kali temple, and he'd cry out loud, my disciples, where are you? Well, he had to wait for them to be born and grow up, and now the time was ready. In Dakshineswar, Sri Ramakrishna prayed for a pure-hearted young man with deep love of God who could stay with him and imbibe his teachings, someone who would be a kindred spirit. Everyone was kind of on their own in a bit. He wanted someone that was really his own. Just a few days before Rakal's coming, Ramakrishna narrated, I saw the Divine Mother putting a child in my lap, saying, "This is your son." I shuddered. How could that be? Then she explained, smiling, "This will be your spiritual child," and I was comforted. Sometime in the middle of 1881, again before Rakal and Mano Mohan came, Sri Ramakrishna had another vision. He saw two boys dancing on a full-blown lotus floating in the Ganga. One of the boys was Sri Krishna himself, and the other was the same boy, whom the mother had previously placed in his lap, Rakal, the cowherd boy of Vrindavan, the companion of Sri Krishna. That very day, Rakal, crossing the Ganga, came to Dakshineswar from Konagar, and the master immediately recognized him. What is your name? Rakal. Everything was lining up. Ramakrishna once said, Rakal has the keen intelligence of a monarch. He could rule a vast kingdom if he wished. This wasn't obvious on first sight. He was a reticent, self-contained young man. In the 5 years between 1881 and 1886, Ramakrishna trained Rakal. He had many experiences of the spirit, including samadhi. After the master's passing, Rakal renounced the world and took monastic vows, with his brother disciples becoming Swami Brahmananda. Vivekananda called him Raja because of Sri Ramakrishna's assessment of Rakal, and he was later known in the order as Maharaj or Raja Maharaj, the great king. From late 1889 to 95, he lived the life of an itinerant monk and practiced severe spiritual disciplines. Most of the time he was with one of his brother disciples at the insistence of Holy Mother and Naran, Swami Vivekananda, so that someone could look after him and beg food for him if he became too absorbed in meditation. While in Omkarnath on the river Narmada, Swami Brahmananda was once in samadhi for 6 days without a break. While he and Swami Subodhananda were in Vrindavan, one of Sri Ramakrishna's admirers, Vijay Krishna Goswami, questioned him. First of all, he gave Rakal, he called him Rakal. He gave him a mosquito net. He wanted him to be comfortable. But he asked him, Sri Ramakrishna gave you everything covetable in spiritual life, visions and samadhi. Why do you then practice so much austerity? Why are you behaving like a beggar? You've already received this. Humbly, Brahmananda said, those experiences and visions I got by his grace. I'm now trying to attain them as my permanent possession. He knew where he was going, but he needed to get there himself, to be established in those experiences, and to be able to be of more service to the people that would come to him, so that he could get those people, monastic and lay, to those high levels of experience. It was needed. In 1895, he returned to Calcutta. His 6 years of wandering had been years of great spiritual growth. And on returning, people were amazed to see his shining face, just beaming with indescribable joy. He had become very calm and grave. The boyish youth who had gone traveling in 1889 had returned a mature man, vitally changed. He was enduring, stalwart, self-restrained, and the master of innumerable spiritual experiences. He was now qualified to rule both a spiritual and a material kingdom with a little more experience. Vivekananda handed over responsibility of the fledgling Ramakrishna movement mainly to Swami Brahmananda and Swami Saradananda before he passed. Vivekananda had tremendous faith in Swami Brahmananda's judgment and loyalty. When he came back from his first visit to the West and started this organization and the service work and all this Rajasic stuff, he would work with Swami Brahmananda. Vivekananda had the vision, but Swami Brahmananda had the practical know-how to know exactly how to put it into practice and what would work in the real world and what would not. And sometimes they'd have these quarrels, but Vivekananda absolutely trusted his judgment. So they were working hand in glove. Vivekananda once said, "Others may desert me, but Raja will stand by me till the end. Nothing can shake him." They shared that deep spiritual understanding, not just their common friendship and knowing each other before they met Ramakrishna. They shared a deep understanding of spiritual life and of their masters. So when Swami Vivekananda said, "We're going to serve humanity as living manifestations of divinity. It won't just be our own liberation, but it'll be service to that divinity in human beings." And even the other disciples didn't want to go along with it. But Swami Brahmananda absolutely understood. No matter which way Vivekananda turned, and he made sharp turns as a leader, Brahmananda was right there on his tail. He couldn't shake him. When Vivekananda passed away, Brahmananda cried like a child over his body. As Swami Saradananda pulled him up, he said, "It's as if the entire Himalayan mountain range has disappeared from before my eyes." So anyway, now he was in charge. Oh my. There might be a part 3. What were his characteristics as a spiritual teacher? In giving initiation, he took into consideration only the aspirant's spiritual consciousness, his yearning for the highest good, and never thought of position, rank, learning, or sex. Monks and householders, men and women, the high and the low, equally shared his grace. While men of worldly greatness without spiritual awakening were summarily dismissed, he most willingly initiated the meanest of the mean if he saw in that person any real spiritual thirst. And he had that same intuition that Ramakrishna did. He could see where a person stood at first sight. He knew what their disposition was, what their spiritual orientation was. He had this remarkable intuition. When he was in South India, the Nepalese servant of a very high government official would be sent to Bangalore with all kinds of delicacies, Bengali delicacies for Maharaj. And Maharaj could see this uneducated young man had a real spiritual thirst. He'd always talk to him of spiritual matters. He'd detain him. The youth in his turn realized the Maharaj's holy influence, but did not dare ask for his grace. One day Maharaj called him to the shrine room and gave him initiation unasked. Now, his usual practice in Bengal was to make people wait for 10 or 12 years and really torture them, you see. But with this simple young man, just so easy. He initiated his disciples according to their individual spiritual character. Every person has to grow spiritually and realize the truth in his or her own way, as determined by those inherited tendencies from previous lives. He could divine the spiritual inclinations and possibilities of the person he was going to initiate and prescribe for him or her the only, or say not the only, but the best course suitable. Before he gave initiation, he would find out through meditation the chosen aspect of God and the particular mantra that would work for this particular disciple. Thus, he guided each in his or her particular line of spiritual development. This is a task which only gurus of exceptional spiritual powers, those who come to earth to fulfill a divine mission, are capable of. An ordinary guru tries to lead his disciples along the path along which they themselves realize God. But this cannot suit one and all. Once at Travancore in South India, a railway employee, a Brahmin by birth, prayed to him for initiation. Maharaj readily agreed. But a day or two after that, he said that he couldn't find out the chosen ideal and mantra and said, "You'll have to wait." Then Maharaj went to Cape Comorin, the southern tip of India, to the temple of Kanyakumari. That gentleman also was in the party. There at Cape Comorin, the Ishta revealed himself to Maharaj, and he gladly initiated the man then and there. There are cases of people who received initiation in dreams. They might not even have known Swami Brahmananda or who he was. Last year we talked about the case of the young girl who was married at 14 and within 2 weeks her husband died. And this was a terrible situation in India, in Bengal at that time. And she prayed for a year in her father-in-law's house. "Oh, Lord, what will become of me? I have no one but thee to help." And then in a dream, Ramakrishna came to her. Of course, she didn't know it was Ramakrishna. She didn't know anything about Ramakrishna. And he said, "My son Rakal is in Bagh Bazar. Go to him. He'll help you." And so this kind of thing happened occasionally. So I want to look at a reminiscence by Swami Siddheswarananda. In his pre-monastic life, he was the son of the third prince of Cochin. and his father later became the Maharaj in Cochin. Swami Siddheswarananda started our center in France, and he wrote the most elegant and moving and detailed description that I've seen of Swami Brahmananda's death and all that happened before he went into Mahasamadhi. He starts when he was 19, in 1916. I had the privilege to meet Maharaj in November 1916. I was a student. One day I read that he had come to Madras. Krishna Menon, my friend, later Swami Tyagishananda, and I decided to pay our respects, knowing that he was a favorite disciple of Sri Ramakrishna and president of the Ramakrishna order. We had to wait for a Saturday to go to that suburb where he was staying, as we were living at quite a distance. I had the good fortune to get a glimpse of Maharaj the day before actually meeting. On a beach, I saw a horse carriage moving south. The occupants were dressed in ochre. Suspecting Maharaj to be one of them, I ran behind the carriage as long as I could, you see. The devotion of this young man. The next day, I recognized Maharaj as one of those I had seen in the carriage. We went to Mylapore to visit Maharaj. We were told that he would soon come to the veranda. We waited for an hour. In the meantime, a car arrived and parked. A Swami of majestic bearing came from the house, accompanied by several attendants. They got into the car. Presuming the elder Swami to be none other than Swami Brahmananda, I approached him. Maharaj, we are students, and we have come here especially to meet you. He said in a gentle voice, "You came to see me? In that case, come again. Shall we come next Saturday?" And he said yes. That next Saturday, we had to wait a long time to see Maharaj because the other visitors were with him. Finally, we were shown in. A mat was placed on the floor for us to sit on. We were so attracted by Swami Brahmananda's charming personality. For some time, we sat without speaking. He was smoking a hookah. After a while, he said, "What do you want?" "We would like to have some spiritual advice." He was in such a meditative and indrawn mood that we felt we might be disturbing him. He said, "Always speak the truth and observe continence." We were at that time interested in the lectures of the great athlete, Ramamurti, and following some of his instructions regarding breathing exercises. So I said, "We have been practicing breathing exercises. Shall we continue them, Maharaj?" "No. They're very dangerous. You must stop them at once." When I was in Multan, I saw a man who had practiced such exercises. As a result, he became very ill. But the fact is, you don't need breathing exercises. It is enough if you repeat the name of God. You can achieve the suspension of breath, which is the purpose of breathing exercises. It's called kumbhaka, by japam and meditation. When the mind becomes concentrated on God, your breathing will become finer and finer, and finally, the breath will stop naturally when you get good concentration. Then he said, "Come to me someday before dawn. I shall give you a mantra." I mean, this is like those poor fellows in Bengal that sweated for 10 years to get a mantra. They don't even know what's happening. "Which day shall we come?" He thought for a while, then called an attendant. He said something in Bengali, and the brahmachari took a book which seemed to be an almanac, and the date was set for us to come again. We had not expected such formalities in connection with the mantram. Afterwards, one of the Swamis explained what initiation was, and that this was the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna, and they were really quite fortunate that he wanted to give them this blessing. All this made us very eager to get this promised aid to our higher lives. But on the appointed day, the ceremony did not take place. We went through great anguish because of the delay. Our examinations were coming, and Maharaj was soon leaving Madras. Finally, on the day of Sri Ramakrishna's birthday in 1917, I was blessed to receive that initiation. I joined on April 19th, 1920. And by the time I saw Maharaj again in May of that year, I had some Bengali under my belt and could understand all the conversations. The spiritual atmosphere that was created by Swami Brahmananda cannot be described. Without a word on religious topics, he would transform any surroundings by his very presence. A veritable powerhouse of spirituality. Discussing spiritual matters was for him only a departure from his usual indrawn mood. But he spoke with authority. I witnessed one such occasion. Maharaj talked for over 2 hours. He was giving advice to a disciple regarding work and worship, instilling in that young man altogether a new attitude towards life. To change these impressions that are stored up over lifetimes is no joke. And Swami Brahmananda had many methods by which he worked on his disciples. Some were gentle and some were kind of brutal. This was both. Yeah, he had both modes. His method of training was unique. A disciple would be reproved, sometimes harshly, on grounds that might seem to him unjust or for very insignificant reasons. For several months, Maharaj had been disciplining a particular young monk in this way. This disciple's feeling was that, for his own reason, Maharaj was looking deep into his soul. He wanted to be receptive, but he could not help getting depressed as this wore on for months. Finally, dejected by repeated rebukes, the disciple proposed to Maharaj that he go to some holy place in southern India and practice spiritual austerity. Maharaj appeared to be very interested in this plan and suggested various suitable places in South India for the disciple. After 2 or 3 weeks of deliberation, a place was chosen, and Maharaj himself selected an auspicious day for the departure. It was 3 o'clock. Maharaj was seated on an easy chair. The disciple came with his bedding and other necessities to take leave of his guru. I was to accompany this young man to the railway station. When the disciple took the dust of his feet, Maharaj said very affectionately, "Where are you going?" ... I'm always interested in what's there in the ... but we don't know. He said, "Where are you going?" "Bring Swami Shivananda." The Swami came and took a seat near his brother. The disciple was still standing near the door, and this whole scene passes before my mind's eye as if it were yesterday. Addressing Swami Shivananda, Maharaj said, "Brother, this boy wants to go away and practice austerity. I can't understand why our boys' minds work this way. This monastery has been made holy by Swami Ramakrishnananda's exemplary life, and these boys won't take advantage of this blessing. Well, where will they find such a spiritual atmosphere as in this monastery, where he lived, where he laid down his life for them? The fact is, they are unable to understand their own minds. Then he turned to the disciple. As long as you think the Lord is there, you will be restless. When you feel he is here, then only will you find peace. What is the use of wandering here and there? You've seen the wandering monks. Do you want to become like one of them? Swamiji founded this order for a great end. Consider it and try to mold your character according to that. Where will you find a better place? The spiritual practices of a single man, in this case, Swami Ramakrishnananda, are enough to make the monastery vibrate with holiness. What a wonderful spiritual atmosphere there was in Dakshineswar when Sri Ramakrishna was living there. The moment our boat would land, we would feel as if we had reached heaven. What love there was between us brother disciples. You do not have such love between you here. A holy person should have a sweet nature and should never use harsh words. I remember a holy man I once met at Vrindavan. He used to visit the temple regularly. For a few days I noticed he was not there, and I missed his holy presence. When he returned, I asked him what had happened. He said, I had a sore leg, and one day in a crowd, the foot of another devotee touched the wound, and I was temporarily disabled. I was moved by the way in which this holy man explained the incident. He didn't complain that he was trampled on. To him, every foot was the Lord's foot, and the Lord had placed his foot on that wound. Develop love in your hearts, and you will achieve everything. You've all become so dry. Where is the enthusiasm you had when you first joined? You all want to be satisfied with your present state of spiritual growth, but I tell you, do not be satisfied with yourselves and where you are now. Don't you know the parable? You're like the woodcutter who's in the sandalwood forest, and the gold is the diamond mine. You can't be satisfied with the sandalwood. Your destination is diamonds. You're young and pure. What infinite possibilities you have before you. Why don't you follow our advice and learn to love and do the things that we ask you to? His ideal, liberation for oneself and service to God and humanity. Don't you see how different we are from the wandering monks? If you leave here, how much time will you have to spend searching for food and necessities? The young man said, Maharaj, you're asking us to do all this, but why don't you help? Sri Ramakrishna did everything for you, ... We're weak. The Swami replied with feeling, do you think we're not helping? Do you make use of the help that is given? How many times a day do you do japam and meditate? Do you keep your mind in the recollectedness of God? Keep in mind Sri Ramakrishna's words. With one hand, hold to the Lord, and with the other do his work. Work done this way as worship will purify you and bring you to the goal. And then Swami Siddhaswarananda's comment. Words can never produce even a particle of the spiritual atmosphere created as Maharaj spoke. And it is this atmosphere which made a lasting impression not only on the disciple to whom these words were addressed, but on everyone who was present. See, how much love is there? I mean, 3 months of scolding him. I mean, he's trying to break through whatever encrusted resistance there is in this man's background so that he can break through and manifest the divinity that's in him. And he gets him set up, goes through all this rigmarole about finding the proper place and getting the proper day, and then he's probably kind of going back and forth, well, I'm actually leaving now, and Maharaj is here, and, there's some mixed feelings, and he's really open to this suggestion. If Maharaj had given him this talk when he first arrived months ago, the result, that he wasn't set up for it. It wouldn't have had that impact on him. So these two were disciples of Maharaj. This is from Boshi Sen, who was not a disciple of Swami Brahmananda. He was a disciple of one of Swami Vivekananda's, actually Swami Vivekananda's first monastic disciple, Swami Sadananda, who was an exemplary monk. And he and his brother and another young man nursed Swami Sadananda through his last illness for an extended period of time. And, well, let him tell his own story. More than 50 years ago, I saw Maharaj at Howrah railway station, Calcutta, for the first time. He was returning with Swami Vedanta from Madras. We students insisted on releasing the horses from their carriage, and we ourselves pulled the carriage through the streets to its destination. I can still feel his blessing hand on my head as I took the dust of his feet at that time. The next time I saw him was 1910. He'd come to visit my guru, Swami Sadananda, at the house in Bospar Lane. Vibhuti Ghosh, my brother Tabu, and I were nursing Swami Sadananda during what proved to be his last illness. He said to Swami Sadananda, I bought some land for a mott at Bhubaneswar. Sadananda said with folded hands, Maharaj, I want to be the gatekeeper of your monastery. Maharaj said, first get well, my child. Those 5 little words so filled with sweetness, tenderness, and love that we almost melted hearing them. We 3 used to be called the dogs of Sadananda, and the dogs of Sadananda were given unusual privileges by the older Swamis, the monastic disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, dogs don't have a very good reputation in India, and but it was, I think it was probably meant in this way. Yeah, the dog will stay by the door of its master no matter what. And they had that kind of shraddha for their guru. And the way they served him in his last days gave them that kind of respect that they received from the direct disciples of Ramakrishna. And it was kind of just humorously that they were called the dogs of Sadananda. After Swami Sadananda gave up his body, I saw Swami Brahmananda, particularly when he came to Calcutta from Belur. He used to stay either at Holy Mother's house or at Balaram Boshe's house, which were close to me. Nevertheless, I was working with the world-renowned scientist J.C. Bose, and because of the experiments, I wasn't always free to go to him whenever I wished, and for this, Maharaj gave me the nickname Season Flower. Any little service, however insignificant, done with real devotion did not escape recognition. Once I was asked to prepare a chillum of tobacco. 3 different attendants in turn came to hustle me, but I refused. I refused to take the chillum to Swami Brahmananda until I was satisfied that it was perfect. When Maharaj drew his first puff, he gave me an affectionate pat on the back. "One more chillum like this, and I'll give you sannyas." One day he asked whether I would be able to shave him. "If you help me, Maharaj, I can do it," as it flashed through my mind how I would feel if I ever cut him while shaving. So it became my privilege to shave him on my way to the Bose Institute. But usually on cloudy or rainy days, he didn't want to have his beard shaved. One morning, when it was drizzling and the work was pressing, I went straight to the lab, quite certain that Maharaj would not need my services. When I saw him that evening, however, he didn't say anything. He just rubbed his chin significantly and made a sound like "Oomph." I learned my lesson. It was not for me to take any decision upon myself considering Swami Brahmananda. One of the little girls at Balaram Bose's house asked his attendant, "Why does Maharaj's barber wear such good clothes?" "Why? Because he's Big Maharaj's barber." And I got another nickname, Big Maharaj's brother. It was another frequent privilege of mine to massage him. He liked a vigorous massage, and of those who were too gentle, he would say, they massaged me as if they were stroking their pet cat. He had a way of pressing his thumb down. Here. He had a way of, I'm not quite sure what was going on here. Maybe someone else can figure it out. While I was massaging him, he had a way of pressing my thumb down under his in a sort of mock trial of strength to see if I could get my thumb out. He was very strong, even into his old age. One day, it suddenly dawned on me while this was going on what a fool I was, trying to pull my hand away when Maharaj was holding it, getting that blessed touch. I instantly ceased the struggle, and he gave me a wonderful smile of understanding. After that, he always continued to give that particular pressure whenever I rubbed his palm. See, he was so playful. He was like a child when he wasn't absorbed in those deep moods. He was so playful. He was so fun-loving. He was so jovial. He'd make the place vibrate with fun and laughter and festivity. And wherever he went, the best food that was available followed him. They looked forward to his visits at Belur, not just for his spiritual company, but because the food at Belur was terrible, except when he was there. One day he was talking about sadhana, spiritual practice, while I was in the act of massaging. Do you think there is any fixed, cataloged price of so much austerity, of so much japan, of so much charity, etc., to get God realization? No, he said. None can force realization out of God. This remark suited me to a T, for I was not practicing any sustained spiritual disciplines at the time. Then he went on, but Why this inconvenient but, I asked myself. But if you don't keep up regular spiritual struggle, you'll not be able to hold that high experience when it comes. You see? Always teaching. Either whatever he's doing, he's always teaching and giving impetus at the same time. In April of 1922, the terrible news came that Maharaj had cholera. I hurried to Balaram Boshe's house to find out if it was true. I just peeped into his room, and though his back was turned, he knew I was there and immediately asked, "Who is it?" I asked if I could fan him. He said, "Yes, please do." With his permission, I was allowed to join the group who nursed him. 2 days before he gave up his body, he was in a wonderful ecstatic mood, showering unending blessings on all. For the first time, we heard from his own lips who and what he was, that he was the eternal companion of Sri Krishna. Put anklets on my feet. I want to dance with Krishna. Ramakrishna said that when he remembered his previous life, that Ramakrishna had intuited before Rakal came to him that he would leave his body. And when they heard this, they knew that the time had come. For the first time, we heard from his own lips who and what he was. This unforgettable scene has been described by his biographers. The blessedness that we all felt at that time has not diminished in intensity through all these years. He filled each of us to the utmost limit of our capacity. An hour before he gave up his body, he quit speaking and seemed to have withdrawn to some distant realm beyond the reach of any of us. I was very gently stroking his palm, and I wondered whether he still remembered that old playful pressure of his thumb. At this instant, I felt it, light but unmistakable. His last bequest to me. It seems trivial, but to have that kind of awareness of other people and their needs and be able to respond to their love that way when he has more than 1 foot out the door to the other world is just almost unbelievable. This particular incident is why I chose that reminiscence. What an unusual, almost unbelievable person. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about, Swami, after Swami Vivekananda's death, someone said in Swami Brahmananda's presence, Vivekananda was the savior of the fallen. And Brahmananda said, I am also the savior of the fallen. So in that regard, we'll look at a reminiscence by Swami Vijayananda, who was Swami Brahmananda's disciple. He joined the order in 1919, had sannyas in 1923, after Swami Brahmananda's passing. And it's about Swami Vijayananda, but also about another person that illustrates this point. So this is probably in the earlier part of his novitiate, when he was getting a good deal of training from Swami Brahmananda in one way or another. So Swami Vijayananda says, few people notice how much damage there is in our prejudice, in forming ideas, in limited moral concepts, and above all in the vanity which closes to us all doors of superior or direct knowledge. See, our preconceived notions closes from the knowledge of the higher reality. We have to somehow get rid of them. I had all these defects, and especially I gave much importance to my moral values. Now I will tell you how by the grace of my guru, one of these values was uprooted. One afternoon in front of a tree where the temple of Holy Mother now stands, I saw the best theater actress in Calcutta, Tara Sundari. I very much appreciated her extraordinary artistic qualities. Any character represented by her was so perfect that the public would always applaud. Seeing her at Bellarmine, I was a little surprised, but because I had some preconceived ideas. I thought people who worked in the theater were immoral. Even after having applauded her many times and having felt deep emotions through her interpretations, the moralist in me did not allow me to greet her personally as I would any other woman. You'll remember the actress Binodidi that Girish Ghosh brought to Sri Ramakrishna. And she was the foremost actress of her day. And Ramakrishna blessed her. He said, may you be illumined. But the women who acted in the theater at that time were kind of outcasted from society. Binodidi's mother and Tarasundari's mother were both courtesans. And they're just outside the pale of society, almost untouchables. So on one hand, they had great artistry. On the other hand, they were just kind of pushed over out of the way by respectable society. So this was the reaction that Swami Vijayananda, that this young man was having. So I did not greet her personally as I would greet another woman. But divine grace was working in its mysterious and inexplicable way. The artist greeted me and asked if she could see Maharaj. Immediately, I forgot the actress and saw in her place a woman of bad ways. Covering my feelings, I answered, Maharaj will not be able to receive you now, since at this time he rests. And I began to move away. But she, with the sweetness that only great souls possess, said, couldn't you please see if Maharaj has come out, and please, if you could ask him to see if I could see him. I went unwillingly. When I got to the veranda in front of his room, I saw Maharaj standing, as if waiting for somebody. What is it, my son? I told him that the actress wanted to see him. Go, he said, run, bring her here. I went down the stairs thinking, how strange. Maharaj is so eager to meet this woman. But I bit my tongue and accompanied her back to Maharaj, who was standing, waiting for her. The actress bowed down at his feet. Maharaj said, come, mother, sit down here. He told me, prepare some good tea, make some toast immediately, bring some fruits and sweets that have been offered in the shrine. With even greater surprise, I went to do it. When I came back carrying the tray, I saw something that became imprinted on my mind forever. The actress was still on the ground, making pranams at the Swami's feet, with her head on his feet. Bathing them in her tears. He was standing in his majestic way. She was saying, "Father, you know my whole life. There's nothing secret from you. Tell me, is there any hope of salvation for me? You have called me Father. So from today, live in this world as my daughter, the daughter of Swami Brahmananda. And now get up, my daughter. You must be hungry. Take something. Drink this tea. It must be very well prepared." The actress dried Maharaj's blessed feet with her long hair. Looking at me with a smile, she took the tray from my hands. Shaking with a feeling I could not express, and with tears of happiness in my eyes, I came down the stairs. Later, after the passing of our great guru, they were both initiated by Swami Brahmananda. Tarasundari and her common-law husband, who was also an actor and a playwright, were both initiated by Swami Brahmananda. Later, after the passing away of our great guru, on the day of the inauguration of his temple at Bellarmont, I saw Mrs. Tara, the great actress, completely transformed. She came to me. She came to me and said, "Little brother, today we have to see our Father in our hearts. Isn't it so?" Controlling my tears, I could only say yes. So what happened? While Maharaj was still alive, she brought a plot of land near the monastery in Bhubaneswar, like where he liked to go and do spiritual disciplines. And he saw it, and he says, "This is a wonderful place for spiritual disciplines. It's like the abode of Shiva." After his death, she lost interest in the theater. She built a house on that property, and she became very depressed. Swami Shivananda heard about it, and he called her to Calcutta, and he tried to console her. He knew the problem was she was missing her guru. He said, "You need to build a temple to your guru on that property." And she did. And she called it Rakal Kunja, the garden temple of Rakal, using his pre-monastic name. And then Swami Shivananda came from Calcutta to inaugurate the temple and install the pictures of Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and Swamiji. And then a little later, Swami Subodhananda came with a portion of Swami Brahmananda's cremation remains and installed those under the altar. And then she started doing her spiritual practice. And I want to read about that. Tara spent hours in the shrine, and her method of worship was unique. She had such deep concentration that one day she didn't even notice there was a fire in her cowshed. The neighbors tried to rouse her from her meditation but couldn't, and attempted to put the fire out themselves. On another day at noon, Swami Subodhananda went to Rakal Kunja and found no one there. The door and windows of the temple were closed, the whole area quiet. He then saw that a window was partially opened, and when he peeped through it, he saw Tara dancing in front of Sri Ramakrishna's picture. She was completely oblivious to the world. As she had always given joy to her audiences in the theater, she was worshiping the Master with her acting and dancing in the same way. Without disturbing her sadhana, Subodhananda quietly left. The time came for Tara to depart the world stage. Her daughter Pratibha narrates the final moments. She was 68 or 69 at this time. It was 10:55 a.m. on April 19th, 1948, the day after Rama's birthday. My mother said to me, "Read the Gita to me." "I can't read today. I will listen." I read one chapter of the Gita. Then she said, "Sing that song, Raghupati Raghava." Sitting on the floor, I began to sing that song. My mother was listening. Meanwhile, other visitors came there, and we all sang aloud in chorus. Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram, Patita Pavana Sitaram. O Rama, O Raghava, the king of the Raghu dynasty. O Rama, the Lord of Sita, the deliverer of the fallen. There was a picture of Sri Ramakrishna in front of my mother. She looked at the master with wide open eyes and passed away with a smile. I'll close with a prayer. Purnamada Purnamidham Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. This ever-changing, interdependent universe of things and beings is infinite. That self-existent, unchanging spiritual reality is infinite. This ever-changing universe, having come from that unchanging reality, that spiritual reality remains undivided, unchanged, complete, perfect, infinite. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.